Hello and welcome. Today we're going to do our DIY MultiFlate. There it is in all its glory. You can build one too just like it. Here's how it works. Got your Smitty boat compressor, comes through, air comes in, goes into this system. You can close off the valve, open this one, it'll go into a closed loop to all four tires and a pressure gauge. All four tires are hooked up together and it'll inflate at the same time. Of course, this won't reach your tires. That's why you have more tube. But for demonstration, this works great. You can exactly see how they're all connected together. They're in one circuit. When one pressure is in one tire, it's the same pressure all four tires at the same time. So when you inflate, this is actually very simple to do. You turn on your compressor, it inflates. When you went take a reading, you actually have to stop it. Otherwise, the pressure will always be higher because it's forcing air into a tire. You'll take a reading, open back up, tires continue to inflate. Have a video separate that explains exactly how that works. For now, also, you can deflate the same way. You don't need this hooked up. You can take it off to deflate. You can leave it on, it doesn't matter. But deflate is have both valves open and all four tires are going to deflate at the same time, same pressure. So because this system is set up so nicely, they are the same pressure in all four tires. If you want tires to be different pressure, just remove two of them. These won't leak, and then you can just deflate two tires or inflate two tires individually as well. So that's how it's set up. Let's get on how this thing is built. Okay, so let's go ahead and build this MultiFlate. Here's the parts that you need. The first thing is the connector. This is a Japanese style quick disconnect. I like these a lot. They work by simply pressing on and then coming off. You can use your typical at-home type shop type fittings, but they don't work as well. We got to work with them a little bit. And I've had these leak on me many times, and I don't want them to leak. I never had a Japanese style quick disconnect leak. So that's the first thing you need, which to connect to your Smitty boat pump or your Maxi Trac. They all have the same Japanese fittings. Then you need some tubing. This is polyurethane 1/4 inch outside diameter tubing. Two different colors, one color for one side of the vehicle, one color for the other. It works for me, help keep them separated. I don't get them so tangled. If it was on one color, it's harder to tell what's what. So you need some tubing. You need some fittings to go on the tubing. These are quick style fittings. They just press on, and then they actually just kind of press and pour it off. So when there's pressure inside the line, it actually forces it out and makes a seal. It works really, really well. I like those a lot. The next thing you need is a coupler, and this guy is right here. Kind of goes in between the whole unit, kind of adds what you need to connect both sides. You can get valves that have, you know, on either side. It's just what I happen to purchase. So you need a coupler, at least one of them. Besides that, you need the lock-on chuck, and these are really great. These are Haltech chucks. They work really simple. Put them on the valve stand, and then this close, and then it's connected, and then to pull off, you just pull off really quickly. These are great because they don't leak. So once it's connected to the hose, there's pressure. They just don't leak out. As soon as you connect them to the tire, then the air will go in or air will go out, but they won't leak once you disconnect them from the tire, which is fantastic. These are probably the most expensive part. I mean, there's about $10 each, so that's $40. But these are totally worth it. You can use cheaper connectors, but then they're probably going to leak when you disconnect them. So I use these. Then you need some plugs, and I just got these stainless steel plugs. Just to kind of fill in the extra holes in your manifold. A couple valves. I like the stainless valves. I can't stand copper or brass. I react to it, so I get the stainless when I can. That way my hands don't smell like copper after I'm done touching it. Need a meter, pressure gauge. This one's digital, pretty inexpensive, works really well. And you need some tube fittings. You can use a Y fitting, or you can use a T, you know, kind of like have a T in there instead of a Y. I'm not sure which one's better. This one seems a bit better flow. This seems to be like collision of flow, whatever. I don't think it really makes a difference, but you need a couple of those. You need some manifolds. I just happen to get these four together. I think they're about 12 bucks, and they work really well. They got like a flaw on them. I don't care. They're gonna get all scratched up, you know, thrown around while you're airing down or airing up. So they're not a big deal. So beyond that, I think that's it for the build. The tools that you need to start working with is, first you gotta put some Teflon tape. These come without, and you have to have something on there. You could try to make the seal without Teflon tape, but it's really difficult. Air always seems to get through. Put Teflon tape on and it seals up much easier. Some of these tube fittings or couplers actually come with a little bit of filler in them, so you don't have to put Teflon tape on there. They work great. Never seen them leak. So what I'm gonna do to put this on, I'm sure there's other ways of doing this, but this is how I do it. So I don't take a huge long piece, but I do double it up. Let's see here. Not much is needed. Let me get that coupler over here. And I just kind of hold it and then wrap it around like that. Kind of hold it. Once you get it over once all the way around, it goes a little bit easier. And then you don't have to hold it. And then just use your finger and kind of press it in there. You don't want to get it over the opening because it can actually fray and go in the airline. Not a big deal for tires, but for other stuff, and more sensitive, you don't want Teflon floating around your air system. But that's basically good enough. And I need to do this for everything now, every single little connection. And so I'm going to go ahead and speed up the video or pause here and come back when it's all done. And we'll continue on with the build. Welcome back. I got all the Teflon tape and all the different fittings ready to go. All we have to do is start assembling it together. Now you have many options here on style. I chose the H configuration. It just seemed to make more sense to me, and it works pretty good. But it's not optimal, I'd say, because once you get your tube up top, it's kind of hanging or it lays flat and it's kind of flopping around. You can't normally get to everything. I'm trying to find a good place for this, but you know, it works well enough for me, and I haven't found a better way to do it. I did put magnets on the back of it to help stick to metal. It works sometimes. They're a little bit weak. I might have to put more on there. I didn't review that earlier, but that's optional. You can use a hook or whatever, or just lay it, you know, on your bumper or what have you. But I did the H configuration. It's kind of a flat thing, but you can change this to, you know, any configuration you want. Let's say you want to, I don't know, how about an I configuration? For lack of a better term, you can totally do an I. So it looks something like this, and then have your hoses come out the bottom. You know, it's like a somewhat of an I type shape, or you can, you know, have this longer up top or something. Maybe some sort of something like this as well. You know, flip instead of this way, you can flip it this way. I mean, there's so many different options you can do. I suppose you can actually do it three-dimensional and actually have it come up like that as well. Whatever. I'm just gonna do an H. It works for me. We got two vehicles. We got to air up together, so that's what I use, and that's what my wife uses, and that's what I'm going to build today. So some of this is going to be kind of mundane and boring, so we'll speed up the video so it's not so slow. Here we go. I see I just noticed a little bit of flash of metal in here, and it's probably not a big deal. Again, this is tires, but they could actually get into your valve. There it is right there. It actually could probably get in your valve and of your tire and plug it, and that's not a good thing. So I'm glad I saw that. Probably not a big deal, but anyway, just kind of keep an eye on this and see if there's any little shavings. Looks good now. So here we go with the eye setup. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I kind of like to do the main stuff first and then kind of do the extras. I'm not sure if this is the best way. I do have a vise over here. It's helpful to hold on to this while I crank it. The valves are a little bit tricky. They actually have a separate ring here, and I don't have the right Allen wrench size for that. But what happens if you put too much pressure on it, it actually will force against the ball inside there, and it'll make it turning a little bit harder. These I've had to adjust just to get them just right. But if they're too loose, they'll leak. If they're too hard, you can't return them. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. They're a little bit stiff to begin with. I'm sure once I get this together, that's really stiff actually. I'll probably back this out a little bit, and once I get that tight in there, back it out, and then it'll be a lot easier to turn. So yeah, that's much easier. So here we go. Here's the build. I got a vise over here to the right, and I'm going to use a vise. What I do is to not scratch it, I use paper towel. It might be a better way, but I put paper towel on it, stick it in a vise. You may have a better method, but this is what I do. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So I got this in here, and again, it's a little bit tight. I'm not too concerned about it because once I get in the inner manifold, it's going to be tight as well. So maybe I'll go ahead and put this in here first, and then I can kind of get it just right how I want it. So let's just get this together. There it is. Looks all done. Of course, you're going to cut your hose to length. This is, for example, this will be right side, left side, doesn't matter. But what you're going to have this hose do is it's going to go to one tire, and then this will be longer going to the other back tire. On one side, the same thing, one front tire and then the back tire on the other side. For length of this though, this is basically from where you're going to air up to the first tire or the front tire, and then this is going to be length from where you air up to the other side front tire. I just did about, I don't know, 5-6 feet on that. It's up to you. This hose can be much longer. I think I have 10 feet or 10 inches. It can be this close. This depends how far you want from the tire. It doesn't matter. It can be a little bit longer. But then the other line going back to the back tire, what I did for my wife's FJ was 125 inches. And that's basically the wheelbase plus the length of how big your rims are, and then a little bit of extra. So I think her FJ is with 106 inch wheelbase, something like that. And basically I went 125. From my excursion, I went 160 because the tires are really far apart and you want to be able to reach them. So that's basically it. It's basically done. They have a video on how to use this, but the build's complete. Thanks for watching.